Hi Jamie, and welcome to Be or Belong podcast, where I interview people who choose to be rather than belong. And you're a prime example of this, because at a time when everything was telling you to belong, you decided to put your health as a priority and be quite disciplined about it. So do you mind just starting by telling us about what actually happened? What were your diagnoses? How did it all come about? What triggered it?
Well, thanks for having me on, and excited to speak to you today. When I was 18, I was diagnosed with two autoimmune diseases, so Crohn's disease and Axial Spondyloarthritis. Both were inflammatory autoimmune diseases. One is a form of arthritis, and the other one is inflammation in the bowels. And I just started university actually in London, and I actually left London. I went back home and decided to essentially spend some time working on my health and navigating through that. It was definitely a journey, and it never finishes. It just starts and then you evolve from there.
So when I met you at uni, you were being extremely disciplined. You weren't drinking, right?
Drunk a little bit in first year
at uni. But you used to get like organic meats from the local butcher, eat a kind of paleo diet, is that right?
Pretty much, yeah. There was a lot going on with, I did a lot of work on my gut. Because when I saw the gastroenterologist, when I was diagnosed, and I was like, is there anything I need to do with my diet? And they said, no, don't change anything. It's like really unfortunate advice to be given. It's a shame that, and some gastroenterologists aren't like that, they will explain the importance of diet. But, I had no clue. And yeah, so it was a long journey with all of the diet and different protocols. So that was going on at uni, which was quite a funny experience, to be honest.
I feel like I'm kind of like a few years behind you, just because I was diagnosed with Hashimoto last year, and I've managed to reduce my dosage of levothyroxine by half in the last year, just through diet. But the same thing happened to me in terms of I went to the endocrinologist, who told me there's no link between diet and autoimmunity or my condition. So did you just start getting certain symptoms and then decide to go to the doctors, or?
Yeah, so I was a skateboarder, pretty high standard. I still skate now, but back then it was every day, and jumping down stairs and rails, doing things that you would expect to cause pain. But I was just dealing with all sorts of stuff, and I thought, it's skateboarding, and I'd see a doctor or a surgeon. I saw an orthopedic surgeon. They're like, it's just pain or growing pains, and then it was this and that. And it was actually when I went to a specialist, an orthopedic consultant, and I said to him, he said, no, it's just he gave me a diagnosis that I knew wasn't right, and I said I need to be referred to rheumatology. I essentially had to force him to refer me to a different department. And then the day I went to see a rheumatologist, they're like, yeah, you've got AS, which is the Axial Spondyloarthritis. And then with the Crohn's, it was a similar thing. It was just a really long journey, to get to that point. But both of those happened within a couple of weeks.
And so do you think it was kind of triggered by skateboarding and that kind of thing, or was it life habits that are just usual in Western culture?
I think with inflammation, there's always a lot to it. It's what pulls the trigger on inflammation. Yeah. It's the epigenetics as opposed to genetics. So I guess for me, it probably was a mix of a lot of things. I probably wasn't, for most of my teenage years, there was a lot of stress, had a lot of things going on, which a lot of young people do, and that probably helped lead to it. And it was also probably the skateboarding, at least for the axial spar, but it's so hard to know. And I think about it sometimes, if I was 10 years old, what could have I done differently to prevent that happening? But I genuinely think it's a case of when it happens, okay, so what's next? You can try and look at all the root causes of things, but when it's inflammation and when it's an autoimmune condition, like there's hundreds of autoimmune conditions out there, but they have a lot of similarities. It's all inflammation, and it's all at some point something triggered it.
I mean, most diseases are caused by inflammation, like regardless of whether they're autoimmune or not, right? And
Exactly.
So tell us about the yoga that you got into as well.
Yeah, so I went to a support group for this condition quite reluctantly. It was like probably about 6 months after diagnosis, and it was for people with this condition, the arthritis. It's sometimes called ankylosing spondylitis as well. Like, it's got kind of a couple of umbrella names. But anyway, I went to this group. It was mainly quite a lot of old people. You know, at least, everyone was at least double my age. And there were a lot of people who had clearly degenerated from the disease. So they had like spinal fusion. So it's like a bamboo spine where the spine fuses together, and they're, you know, like hunched over in this forward stoop position. And I think it was very overwhelming. But then I saw this one guy. He was like standing really tall. He looked really flexible. He was like 60. Well, he must have been 68, 69 at the time. And I saw him put his palms flat on the floor, like from standing. So like not just touching his toes, but palms flat on the floor with his legs like legs straight. And he said, well, I started yoga when I was, you know, properly, took it seriously from about the age of 40. And here I am today. And it was like a light bulb moment. Like my whole world changed, because I was like, at the time I was really scared. I didn't know like where my life was going. I was like very afraid, actually. And I think the online community kind of reinforced that, because, you know, you always hear about the worst case scenarios of things online. Anyway, so it was literally that day I did like my first like yoga practice, and it was from there like everything evolved, and it took me on a completely different path. And now today I like co-found a business with Jeff, and we teach yoga for AS, thousands of people. So it's really awesome, I think, to have someone at the time where you're in that dark place to show you there's hope and you can like recover a better quality of life. And there's hundreds of ways to do it, but I'm just happy that I found a few really good people at the time.
So have you managed to recover a better way of life? Do you feel in pain still sometimes, or do you feel like you've come far, or do you think it's kind of relapses, ebbs and flows?
Oh, I think where I am now compared to where I was is like a huge shift. There was a point where like I remember being in so much pain, like, yeah, straight up, like I was so depressed, and it was really, I could hardly walk, and then the Crohn's, when it was at its worst again, was like, it was really bad, and now, like, in terms of like the arthritis, sometimes experience fatigue, sometimes stiffness, but I haven't had pain for like 2 years. I haven't had pain. And the other big change was my spiritual perspective on it all, because when I was diagnosed, and a lot of people come to this position, and I don't blame them because I was the same, but they adopt a warrior mentality. So they go, right, I'm going to fight this. What can I throw at this problem? Like, I'm going to throw diet, I'm going to throw exercise, I'm going to throw... And it was all of these things. And when you're fighting in a war, like, there's never peace. And when that war is your own body, like, there's a lot going on in terms of stress. Stress is pro-inflammatory, and the cycle sort of continues. And I was very fortunate to meet someone who explained to me and helped me change my perspective, instead of fighting and making peace with how I was feeling at the time. And when you can do that, then I think your whole perspective changes. And when you don't put as much weight and heaviness on pain or symptoms, then it can change your life. It doesn't mean you ignore things. It's actually quite the opposite. But you see they're there, you accept them, and then from that place of acceptance you can begin to do something about it. And I think I was in this fighting state for so long, and that was huge for me.
So who was this one person, and how did you even discover?
Yeah, so his name's Peter Winslow, and there's a big connection between the mind and the body, and that's beginning to be proven by science now. But he did a lot of work on that and found that his symptoms decreased massively when he worked not just his physical health, but his emotional and spiritual relationship to a condition. And he helped teach me that. And I think it's very easy for the medical community and also people with an autoimmune condition to get frustrated at hearing a story like that, because they may interpret it as saying, oh, you know, you can be cured with your mind. And it's not saying that. It's saying that you can shift your perspective to the condition, which takes away the heaviness and the mental and emotional pain. And that is a lot more empowering to go from that place. I think it, from my perspective, has helped me tremendously.
Yeah, it seems like a really beautiful and beneficial way to look at it. But that seems like the mentality of meditation as well, right? So did you kind of discover that through that, all about awareness and noticing your emotions? Or was it specifically this person who came to you first?
I'd been doing different practices for about 1.5 years before then. So I'd been practicing yoga, and this was probably why I was open to having support from Peter. But I'd been doing meditation. I'd been doing a lot of physical yoga, or what you call asana, so the physical postures. I've been doing breath work, and all of those things helped put me on a path to then changing like the perspective on how I approach things. So yeah, it's all intertwined. You know, like a lot of the lessons I learned from Peter were from the teachings of actually Eckhart Tolle, and there's some incredible, a book called The New Earth was really amazing when I read it, and that shifted my perspective definitely on looking at pain and looking at my reactions to things.
So also being diagnosed at such a young age can have quite a toll on your mental health, just for the like sheer isolating nature of it. So how did you kind of deal with those emotions?
Well, it was a journey for sure. I think it's only been the last probably year or so when it's really got to the point where I'm very empowered by these conditions. But what happened initially was I had to stop skateboarding for like 2 years, and this was like something I did from the age of like 10, and I had a huge community of friends. They were like family to me, and it was too painful to go and see them without going and skateboarding, you know. So I still maintain a relationship with them. I'd still go and see them and, you know, catch up with them, but not being able to skateboard with them was really hard. And then I think I went to the point of finding different communities where it was okay to live a different life. You know, so that's why for me, I started really working on myself and looking at my like spiritual, emotional, and then physical health with diet, and exercise, and looking at nutrition. I found myself in a community there, and my mental health definitely really suffered. But quite honestly, my mental health was probably worse leading up to the diagnosis. And it was shortly after the diagnosis, you know, 6 months to a year, when I think I realised and had a shift in my mental health, because I realised what physical suffering was like, and going from mental pain, because, you know, growing up I had, you know, struggled with some mental health problems, and when I experienced physical pain, everything changed, because I went, hold on, I can control my mental health by my approach, and what I can really work on my mental health. And at the time I thought, well, once you have your physical health, you've got everything, and your mental health can also be worked on. So I think for me, it actually got better, but it was a long journey. But the social aspect was always tough. I think as a young person, it's the norm to like not really look after yourself to the extent that would be helpful if you're dealing with a lot of inflammation. You know, like staying up till like 3 in the morning and partying, drinking, doing everything like that. I actually did it like from the age of probably like 14, you know, so I lived that lifestyle, you know, eating crap, like just living like a young person, which is sad in some ways that that's the norm. And I think it's then balancing a happy medium because, you know, I think I took everything very seriously for a long time after the diagnosis. I became very serious. And I think that was a journey I had to go on to then realise, you know, that life's so precious and we should just see our friends, our family, the people we care about. We should have fun. We shouldn't go out and focus on how good it is for our health to do these things, but only do it with people that you actually want to do it with. I think I've now realised, like, the people that are really important to me, they're the people that I will go and do those, you know, late nights with and go and have fun with, because it's worth it. Like, it's so worth it. So what it's made me do is reprioritise, like, who's important to me. And it feels selfish at first, but it's not. It's actually the opposite, because the attention and the love you give to those friends, people around you, all your loved ones, relationship partners, it's huge.
Mm. So do you live like a bit half and half now, and have you seen any difference in that?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I find that now, if I have an opportunity to celebrate life, and it means not doing like things in a very vigilant way, maybe not eating the food I usually would and going to bed at a different time and not doing this and not doing that, I do it. I take it. I take that opportunity, because I have like a protocol where I look at like myself on my deathbed and ask myself, like, would you regret not taking up this opportunity? And basically the answer's always there, and then I know what to do. And then from there I can decide, okay, yeah, this is worth it. And yeah, if it caused like a crazy amount of suffering for me, then sure, I probably would, do it less. But the reality is, health, inflammation, comes down to so many factors. Loneliness is one of the most inflammatory things you can put on yourself. But you look at the science of what loneliness does to our bodies, it's crazy. So I think it's about striking a balance.
I feel like that's the side of things that people don't think about. To actually do the proper diets that will be really low inflammatory to help you with a condition like this, you have to be a bit lonely sometimes. But that in itself can be inflammatory. And if you could go back and change anything about how you first dealt with the condition, would you? Or what?
Yeah, I would have looked at inflammation in every possible way. I would have looked at what practices can help with inflammatory processes. You know, you probably now heard of Wim Hof, and all of these things. And I started it like a couple of years ago, before he was cool, of course. No, I'm joking, but it's amazing that someone like him is now getting into the mainstream, because he's showing that you can reduce inflammation by protocols, by yoga, by breathing exercises, intermittent hypoxia, that breath hold that he teaches to everyone, which has been around for years, thousands of years.
So what exactly is that? Just to explain Wim Hof a bit.
Yeah, I mean, his main two protocols are breath work and cold exposure. The breath work actually comes from what's called Shumo, which is an ancient style of breathing. But essentially it's just deep inhalations, exhalations, and then followed by a breath hold. And that breath hold has a positive stress response. So it's all looking at stress positively. And I think that was the light bulb moment for me, because there's some things that have good stress, and that good stress causes a response that actually reduces inflammation. So cold exposure is another example of that. Another example of good stress is exercise. Another example is sunlight. There's so much good stress, so it's about looking at, okay, what is stress, what is inflammation? And that was probably... Yeah, that's why I'm outside. The sun is huge, and environment. Our environment's massive, and nutrition. For me, I think if I did the journey again, I would have been under a nutritionist if I was to follow like a strict protocol, or at least somebody who had been through the journey and would be able to give me a lot of support. I think that would be it. But I don't regret anything, you know. It's just made me like who I am today, and I think my biggest advice I would have given to myself is like, take a step back and look at what you're doing and look at how you're feeling, because I lost so much weight on the protocols I was on. My relationship to food was so terrible because I was like afraid of so much food. I remember like going on holiday with my mate and like not being able to eat out like anywhere. I was like just above 9 stone, which is like super, like, yeah, I had like probably 7-8% body fat. Yeah, I thought I was doing everything right, you know, and I'd listen to a podcast every day and like, you know, I'm learning about this and about this. I don't, you know, and you get into rabbit holes, but you think you're doing the right thing. And I think now, you know, like now I'm at a really healthy weight. I'm like got a lot more body weight, a lot more muscle mass. But the thing that changed was I no longer follow ideologies. And this is the difficult thing with nutrition, with lifestyle. There's so much, weight is so much in like ideologies, and this is right, this is wrong, we're in this camp, you can't come to our camp, blah, blah, blah. And it's about being your own person and saying, okay, like, you know, plants, I think there's some plants that are really helpful. I think there's some like animal products that are really helpful. I think there's this practice that's really helpful. I think this is important, this is important. But if you go down each rabbit hole, then you end what you're left to eat, you know? Even things like fasting, like, yeah, I used to fast a lot. Now I kind of intermittent fast. Sometimes I do like a 24-hour fast. There was points when I was fasting, like, you know, I was eating 4-hour window, you know, for a good, like, you know, 4 to 6 hour window for a good year. And I was just listening to fasting podcasts and going, yeah, like, autophagy, I'm regenerating my cells. But I was catabolic. I was losing so much weight and muscle. I was doing like all of these things. And, you know, I'm not the only one. There's thousands of people out there that have gone down these rabbit holes thinking they're doing the right thing. But you have
with, like, complete discipline, like when you learn something.
Yeah. And that's the issue. So what I've done now is I go all in on moderation.
Okay.
Like I do everything in my power to moderate things. Okay. Now I look at what's the minimal effective dose of everything. What's the minimal effective dose of yoga? Like, you know, stretching an hour a day, 2 hours a day is too much. What's the minimal effective dose with weight training? What's the minimal effective dose with nutrition? And I think you've got to remember the people that are explaining, selling, promoting certain nutritional practices, it's their business. So it's going to be easy for them to say, oh, don't eat kale because kale can give you kidney stones. Oh my gosh. But the reality is if you really like kale, you can have it every now and again. Okay, but don't eat eggs because some people with autoimmune diseases have problems with eggs. Okay, well, see how you get on. Are you all right with it? Fine. Eat your eggs. Yeah. There's so much and so much of you should. And if you listen to all of that, you end up not being able to think for yourself.
I feel like that's a very interesting life outlook as well, and something that, yeah, I've never really thought about that, to take the minimal dose of everything. So is that what you, I guess with your yoga business though, do you promote long hours of yoga? How long do you do lessons, or how does it work?
So we say to all of our clients, do an hour practice a week and then supplement with 20 to 30 minutes a day. And that'll give you enough to get the benefits. If you want to do more, go for it. And that's the key, because life is for living. And it's not just for upholding practices. And in the West, we try and dedicate our lives to 100 practices. So it's a lot easier if you become a monk. You dedicate yourself to meditation. You have a certain diet protocol. You have a certain way of living. But you're all in that. But what we try and do now is, I'm going to dedicate myself to weight training, to yoga, to exercise, to nutrition, to seeing friends, to socializing, and it's not manageable. It's actually impossible. So what you look at is what are the biggest things that are going to benefit me? Like, okay, I'm working today, right? I can sit out in the sun and work. It's just looking at little habits and tweaking.
Changes. And do you think, so from being a really disciplined, all-in kind of person to then recognising that the minimal effective dose is the best thing to do, what changed? Was there a light bulb moment for that, or was it kind of a gradual process?
I think it grew from the frustration of looking at, it's especially nutrition, looking at all of the ideologies. I've seen it over the last couple of years. It's like a group of promoting plant-based, a group promoting carnivore, a group of promoting this, a group promoting that. And I realised that, like, it's not healthy to be under an ideology in which the other people are enemies. And I also looked at that in the yoga world, right? I've been teaching for years now and seeing that people are very fixated on yoga is that everything you need to do. You don't need to go to the gym. You don't need to lift weights. Yoga gives you everything. I practice yoga every day, but mainly I start the day with breath work and I do some sort of mobility, physical stretching in the evening, bit of meditation, and I go to the gym and I go skateboarding, and I don't do it because it's like you have to follow this practice so vigilantly. I realised that discipline equals freedom. That's not my quote, but I love it because it does. So you've got to look at what discipline provides freedom. Now, if discipline from a diet and a protocol is providing you freedom from pain but not freedom from socialising, then you're not free. So you've got to look at what freedom that discipline provides. So for me, I'm very disciplined with work because I know the product of that is I'll have more free time. I found ways and practices to find where discipline's really helpful, but it's not always helpful. It's always it's also important to allow time to live your life and be stupid and spontaneous and enjoy it, because we're all going to die one day.
I feel like life's about like nuance and variety anyway, but most things in the world are trying to like become all this very narrow-minded mindset. I guess this is a topic that applies to everyone really, because if inflammation is the root cause of most diseases, and there are small things that you can do to reduce each day. Like sometimes I wish that I knew certain things that I could have done before, like you were saying, just like the benefits of turmeric, for example, or like you're saying, being in the sun. Is there anything that you do religiously that reduces inflammation that's easy to do that anyone can do?
Yeah. This every day, especially in the morning, because that impacts sleep, which is the second most important thing. So sleep is so underrated. People are so fixated on nutrition because you can kind of control what you eat, but sleep is something that people are kind of afraid maybe at approaching with us, because it's like, so many people struggle with sleep. And that's something that I've taken so seriously about educating myself about sleep, because sleep is where you recover. Sleep is where you rest and rejuvenate your body. And we really don't put enough attention on sleep. That's one thing that I always prioritise. Even if I go out late, like, I'm still making sure I get a good night's sleep 90% of the time. So that would be my other thing. The sun, sleep, cold exposure.
So when you sleep after a night out, do you sleep in later? Because surely that will like your circadian rhythm, the sunshine. Yeah.
But you can help your circadian rhythm by, like, for example, if I got up late, like at a certain day, if you go and watch the sunset, like, and even take your shoes off and put your feet on the ground for 10-15 minutes, like, that's going to have a massive impact on helping your circadian rhythm. I take my sleep hygiene more seriously than food now, which I thought I would never do, but it's huge. So that would be the other one, sleep, the sun, the cold. And then with food, like, before you start looking into ideologies, look at just logic. Like, for example, there's debates around whether certain vegetables or animal products are healthy or unhealthy, but it's very clear cut that vegetable oil doesn't make any sense in our diet. There's so much literature on trans fats and the amount of omega-6s. It's very easy to look at the literature. It's evidence-based that omega-6s we don't want much of them, and we need more omega-3s. Like, that's simple. And whether you're vegan, you're carnivore, you're paleo, you're whaleo, you're whatever you want to call yourself, you need to look at the simple things that are true, that are undisputable. Then you can look at things, again, with nutrition, like...
And also with, like,
sugar.
Oils, it's very easily substituted for, like, coconut oil or ghee.
It tastes so much better as well.
True, yeah.
The bottom line is, people, ditch your chip and fry. Put it in your car, maybe, but don't put it in your body. And that's probably one of the biggest ones. Aside from that, when it comes to grains, I think my approach would be look at what our ancestors have done with grains for the last 2,000 years. It's only been the last couple of 100 years that we've not done processes like fermenting foods, sprouting foods. The grains that we eat have changed. So, you know, if you like breads, start with some sourdough. But I think the clear cut is vegetable oil. And aside from that, everything's pretty fair game and pretty subjective. It's clear that you don't want too much sugar.
Do you eat?
I just eat real food. So something that hasn't been processed by people as much as possible. So, like, I don't know, I'll tell you what I've eaten today. How about that? And that's probably a reflection of the sort of diet I have. Today I had 2 eggs cooked in some olive oil with actually a bit of black pepper, some turmeric, and I had some raw sauerkraut, and then I had some sardines and some capers, and then I had some raw cheese. I struggled with dairy. Big difference with unpasteurizing, especially for my gut. It's been really helpful. I had half an avocado, and then I had some black garlic. I love black garlic. And that was a little snack. And then for dinner, I've got slow-cooked a lamb shoulder this morning, and I'll probably have some, like, potatoes and some sweet potatoes, some veg, and then, I don't know, maybe some fruit. But I won't go out to the shop and put brownies on the grocery list, but if I go to a friend's house and they're like, I've just made homemade brownies, I'm like, yes, please, I'll definitely have one of those. But what I won't do is, like, buy a pack of Jaffa cakes and eat them on my own, because that doesn't bring me much joy. So I've also decided what shit food is worth having, right? I really don't enjoy ice cream very much, whereas I love brownies. So every opportunity to enjoy foods that make and bring me a lot of joy, that I'll take. But that being said, the good thing is, when it comes to these foods, you can actually make really good food that's healthy as well. So, like, as I grow up, like, you know, hopefully one day I have a family and stuff, like, I'll make them brownies and cookies and stuff, you know, and chips, but I just don't have to put, like, margarine in them, and you don't have to put sugar in them. Like, you can find really good alternatives, and you can enjoy these foods. Like, I've made some, like, really... You can make great food, and I just think it's about looking at what food's delicious, and you can do it healthily, you know. My aim one day is to just have, like, my own chickens, a vegetable patch, and maybe a friend who's a farmer, grow some fruit, and then, like, you know, I might have to go get some other ingredients here and there. But, like, if I go to an event and it's crisps and, like, sausage rolls, I probably won't eat them because they don't bring me any joy. But if I go to a bad event and it's, like, homemade pasta and some, like, incredible brownie, then I might have a bit of that, because the joy and the connection that brings is anti-inflammatory. And that might trigger people and be like, oh, you can't eat any of this food. But 99% of the time I don't. But it's just knowing that you can eat those foods.
Yeah.
Even if, let's say, they cause a reaction. I'm not saying people should do this, but what caused a lot of stress for me over the years was having this fear of averting everything. I couldn't do this, I couldn't do that. And now it's like, I choose not to eat that food. And sometimes I'll choose to eat
that
it.
Mindset switch is massive.
If that makes sense.
Rather than being like, I can't because of this, I choose not to because it's not worth it, like the pros and cons and everything. And
For sure.
Was there any, like, specific moments that stand out for you that where you felt extremely isolated and like no one really understood, because living such a, I guess, hippie life, not many people follow these kind of regimens. Not many people this young are diagnosed with autoimmune conditions, although it's massively on the rise. I think it's like 1 in 8 women now or something. Like 6% of the UK population it is on the rise, but at the same time, there aren't many people out there like you. So were there any times stand out?
Yes, of course. I mentioned when I was on holiday with my friend, I went to Barcelona, and I remember going from like restaurant to restaurant and just being like, can't eat here, can't eat here, can't eat here, just because I was so scared of like, what if it's got vegetable in it? Like, what if they're cooking with margarine, or what if they've got sugar in it? And that was really lonely. And unfortunately, that was the mindset I was in. Now, of course, I know better to not be so concerned about these things if it's like a rarity. But the other time I think was when I couldn't go skateboarding, and no one really like understood like the pain I was in, because like skateboarders are hard, you know. We're not like football players. If we fall over, it's not a big deal. And like I'd taken some heavy slams skateboarding, and that was never a problem. But like being able to having to tell your friends like, I can't skate anymore, like that was really hard. Now I can skate. It's great. I skate like every week. That was a lonely time. And then also I was always quite a confident guy, and I think I lost my like lust for life, like this feeling of like just bringing energy to the world, you know? Because when you're young, you're more energy than mass. But as you get older, you know, you become more mass than energy. But I lost a lot of my energy, physical energy, spiritual energy, and I think it took a long time for me to rebuild that. And I think now like, I'm committed to just helping the world and helping empower people, and just as much as I can, like just show up and live your life. And like, yeah, autoimmune diseases are tough, but like life's worth it. Life's worth more than an autoimmune condition. And what I mean is, when I say that, is like you can still choose to enjoy your life. You just have to navigate through it. And I think what really changed and was a pivotal moment was this guy called Sean Stevenson I found on the internet. He's called the 3-foot giant. He died recently, but he was 3 foot. He had brittle bone disease. He'd broken like 600 bones. He was disabled. And he literally said, he was like, pity is a disease on yourself. Like, and you have to make a choice, basically, to decide whether to like live your life and do the best you can, because we're all human, but you have to empower yourself to choose. And every situation, you can't control pain, really. You can't control many things, but you can control what you do with that. So if you've been diagnosed, you can't control that. Then you can go, wow, okay, well, now I can choose to do some things about it.
You know, like I feel like in my case, when I was diagnosed, the first feeling that you get is like, this is so unfair. Why me? Like, why? In my case, it was triggered by the parasite and the contraceptive pill, that kind of thing. And then I was thinking, oh, why did I decide to go on the pill? Like, why did I eat that food in Asia or whatever? But really, the place I've kind of come to now is that, like, life throws shit at you, at every single person, and it might be emotional, it might be physical, it might be a condition, but it's not like other people aren't having difficulties too with their lives. It's just all in different forms. And so then it's like the mental way of dealing with it. Because it's a medical diagnosis, you kind of see it as something more serious, but really everyone goes through it. And maybe they'll go through a similar diagnosis for just in 10 years.
I completely agree with you. I think when it comes to like something that's labelled as incurable, what I realised is, and this is something I tell my clients quite often, is like this disease is progressive according to like, you know, literature and the medical community, meaning it gets worse. But you can get better and you can progress as well, right? You can progress in how you live your life.
AS gets worse. Is that what it is supposed to be? Oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And a lot of, not all autoimmune conditions, but a lot of autoimmune conditions can get worse. But you have to choose whether they get worse, right? And there's lots you can do to manage the condition. But what I always say to people is like, there's an outcome that's negative. It gets worse, it progresses, more disempowered. But there's also an outcome in which you can progress the other way, and then you get this equilibrium and it balances out.
Yeah.
So you've got to think of where in your life you can progress positively as well, and you do have a choice to do that part. The other part, you can do the best you can to, that's just going to be, whether it happens, it happens. But the other part you can control. You can control what you do to empower yourself and make a positive progression. And that's where you have to make a choice, which is actually takes a lot of courage, and it's scary, and but both of them are hard. It's hard to not do anything, and it's also hard to do something. So you have to start, I think, and that's why for me, if I stripped it all down and I wrote a book for myself, I would just be like, okay, what's the minimal effective dose for all of these things? What's important to you? What do you want to do in your life? It's about recovering from, not recovering from a condition. It's about recovering your life.
Yeah.
A lot of people with autoimmune conditions have had previous, and this is just anecdotal, right? I don't know if there's literature on this, but struggled with some sort of emotional trauma.
Yeah.
Can struggle with mental health, have had physical problems in the past. So when you get a diagnosis, there is an opportunity to get yourself into remission. And if you break down the word remission, you've got re-admission. So it's an opportunity to reorient your mission in life. For me, I don't think if I hadn't have had these diagnoses, I probably would be doing something that I wouldn't be enjoying at this point. I love my job, I love what I do, and I love my life. And I can say that hand on heart. And there was most of my life I couldn't say that, and that is because of the condition. And I do believe that everyone can have the opportunity when something like this happens to do something, even if it's just the diagnosis means you start a new hobby, you start painting and you're passionate about that and you share it with others. You don't have to start some massive non-profit organization and help 1 billion people, but you can start by saying, oh, there's someone somewhere in the world, you might not know them yet, but they've just been diagnosed with your autoimmune condition. You could help them. And that is, I think, what is really empowering, is that you can help people. And by doing that, when you help someone, you help yourself. That'd be my bottom line.
That's partly why this podcast is important, because there just might be just one person listening who might have an autoimmune condition, who might just hear something that's slightly useful. And also, when you get a diagnosis, for me anyway, personally, the doctors kind of made it sound a bit bleak. They were just saying, you'll be on these drugs for the rest of your life. It's not that bad. You'll live a normal life, but you have to take a drug every day. And for me, that was kind of it kind of restricts your freedom to think that you're going to have to be on drugs for the rest of your life. But then when you look more into it and you start doing these things to lower inflammation, being living proof that I managed to reduce my dosage when the doctors are saying that's impossible and that's a miracle, it's I feel like the medicine needs to catch up with the kind of functional side of things. And someone said to me that Western medicine is really good at treating acute disease when it gets really bad. They're good at sorting that out and stopping people from the verge of death. But when it comes to chronic conditions, they're much more lagging, just because I think the research is yet to catch up.
I think it's something that we're moving towards. It's just going to take time. So there's the good people who work in areas around autoimmunity accept that medicine is really helpful, but you need to help the medicine. I currently don't take any medicine, but I'm not opposed to taking it. If in 2 weeks I want to take medicine, I can choose to do that. I think what tends to happen is people fall under anti and pro, whereas actually I'm pro whatever helps.
Thank you. I felt this has been a really refreshing conversation, because often people are very militant about, especially when it's a personal journey, isn't it? But it seems like you've got to a very healthy standpoint in that way. And I love the mentality of minimal effective dose. Yeah. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Well, I've loved chatting to you. It's rare when I speak about these things like in this way, because I tend not to, not because I know some people would find it interesting, but I think it's nice to be in this space where, like, I know hopefully someone might listen to this and finds it empowering. Because I know if I heard this conversation and certain things, like, you don't have to follow something vigilantly. You can find what's helpful and take that and use it. And things aren't straight completely one way. That would be really helpful. So hopefully people find it helpful. And it's awesome you're doing this. I think it's brilliant, and I'm looking forward to hearing how things go on your journey and all of that as well.
What's your business name for anyone out there?
It's just called Yoga for AS. So you could go www.yogaforas.com, or our social media handle is just Yoga for AS.
Do you man the page, like if someone wants to get in touch?
Yeah. Drop me a message for sure. I do have a personal Instagram, Jamie Boder. I'll probably more likely reply on the other one quicker. But put both on.
Okay. Thank you again.
You too.
You too.
Have a great day.